It is Monday, the 20th of April, week 4 of lockdown. Now, those that have followed my broadcast know that I have been very critical of many of the government's approaches over the course of the last few weeks. We have a health crisis, we have a growing economic crisis, but ultimately this is a political crisis. The argument that we're working very hard, we're working day and night, just does not wash with me at all. They should be working hard. It is, to quote the Prime Minister, a national emergency. And just because people work hard doesn't always mean they're actually going to deliver. I think the real crisis here is one of leadership. And to say, it's okay, we're following the science. Well, here's the problem with that. Scientists have very differing opinions. We all know we got off on the wrong foot with herd immunity and then did a 180-degree turn, 2 or 3 weeks into this crisis. Well, I thought what was written yesterday in the Sunday Times was pretty damning. Yeah, okay, I know. Whenever articles like this are written, there's always a bit of score settling being done by people who anonymously brief. I know that myself, particularly from UKIP, but a little bit from the Brexit Party too. So we expect that. But the charges are those of complacency, those of inefficiency, and even those of sloth, those of spending too much time on holiday. And that was directed at the Prime Minister. He spent 10, 11 days missing in action. He was in Chequers at a pretty crucial period of all of this. Now, look, he had some personal problems, end of marriages, getting engaged, a baby on the way. I understand all of that. Thank God he is getting better. That is really, really important. And I think with the right level of leadership, once he's back at the helm, he can turn some of this around. And I think that he needs to, because I'll tell you something, Keir Starmer isn't Jeremy Corbyn. And I have a feeling on one or two areas that public opinion could start to turn very sharply against this government. The one thing I am certain of is that Boris is by far the best of a bunch who, in the main, are pretty average. So let's think about testing. Yes, Matt Hancock, the health secretary, who so reminds me of that classic Cameron Osborne era politician, somebody without any real achievements in life at all, whose sole ambition is to climb the greasy pole. And he sort of thinks he can just stand up at press conferences and make us promises about the numbers that are going to be tested. And somehow, once we've all been patted on the head, we'll all go away and be jolly grateful to Matt Hancock. Well, I'm sorry, that just is not the case. And one of the most startling revelations in the Sunday Times is that he hadn't even begun properly to engage British businesses about testing until the 1st of April, the day before he made the big statement on the 2nd of April that we would be up to 100,000 tests a day by the end of April. Now, I think you all know that that simply isn't going to happen. Thought what was interesting over the weekend was that one of the government advisors, when asked a question, Chris, what do you do? Asked a very straight question. Why is it that Germany has death rates that are so much lower than ours? And the answer was because they've got bigger testing capacity. Yes, that's right. Do you know, Germany are testing more people a week than we've managed to do in the last 2 months. I think that says one hell of a lot. And do you know something? I may not be, on the European Union, the biggest fan of Angela Merkel, but I have to say, in a crisis, she has proved to be, not once, but twice now, because we had 2008 and the economic problems, and I think she's proved to be a very, very effective leader. Everyone knows we are not going to reach 100,000 tests a day. Everyone knows that in countries like South Korea, where they had efficient testing, they made things happen. I don't totally blame Matt Hancock for this because he inherited a very bad position. I mean, after all, we had the 2016 pandemic report that was conducted, and Public Health England since 2016 decided to do, well, almost nothing really, and just pursue a herd immunity approach that might have led to up to 750,000 to die. But the point is, we knew about this crisis. We really properly knew about this crisis in the third week of January. It is now the 20th of April, and Hancock has been unable to get a grip on this. I think he doesn't have the authority. I think the public are now beginning to see right through him. And Boris, when you're back at the helm, sack him, get rid of him, show that as a leader in a crisis, you can be ruthless. You absolutely need to. This, of course, all leads us on to PPE. And what a week this is going to be for PPE. It is, I think, going to dominate the news agenda over the course of the next couple of days. I mean, they must think we're stupid. You know, some non-entity called Robert Jenrick, who apparently is a cabinet minister, stands up at the weekend and says in a very wooden delivery that it's all okay because there's a consignment of PPE that's on its way to us from Turkey, which I suppose makes a nice change from China, you know, because we normally rely on China for everything and think they're our saviours and praise them to the heavens. No, it's on its way from Turkey, and an impressive 400,000 medical gowns are going to be delivered tomorrow. Well, that sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Until you understand the numbers. That is only 3 days' worth of supply. And as we found out yesterday, it didn't even arrive on time. We are facing, and it's not just the NHS, you've got to think about people in our care homes. We, of course, the only country in the world who are announcing our death figures and not including those died in care homes. So when we finally get the truth, we know the figures will be several thousand higher than they are now. Quite why government can't level with us. Perhaps they think we're too stupid. I don't know, but we do need to be told the truth. So I think a good thing that happened over the weekend was that Lord Dayton was put in charge of delivering PPE and properly engaging British manufacturers. He's got a lot more chance of commanding respect out there amongst British industry than Hancock would ever have had. So I'm pleased that Hancock at least has been relieved of that duty. Dayton, of course, he was famed for delivering a very successful London Olympics and is known as something of a doer. But, you know, for the last 3 or 4 weeks, many of us have been talking about the comparison with the media baron, Lord Beaverbrook, who came in 1940 and who was, you know, I think something of a tyrant, frankly, but got aircraft production to where it needed to be. This is a good move, but it should have happened weeks and weeks ago. I repeat the point. Boris needs to get a grip. And I tell you this, if by the end of this week, and bear in mind there are now 80 frontline healthcare workers who have died during this crisis, if by the end of this week we start to get, you know, genuine rebellions from some nurses and some doctors, then I promise you public opinion will snap. And Keir Starmer, as I said earlier, he's not Jeremy Corbyn, but Boris can save the day. He just needs to. Now, lockdown. 4th week of lockdown. We're briefed this morning that Boris is worried about easing lockdown for fear of a second big contagious wave. And I completely understand that. In fact, I suspect that what will happen during the rest of this year, as we get gradual easings and as we see reinfection coming back, I think there's going to be a sort of a little bit of a sort of stop-start, trial and error approach to this. It's one of the things that says to me, I can't believe the extent to which the stock markets have rallied as if it's all going to be okay. It's not. There are going to be setbacks along the way. And I understand that concern of Boris Johnson's. I still think we do need to start easing. I've talked about garden centres before. And I'll make this prediction. I've done it already, but I'll do it again. Once again, in a spirit of followership, not leadership, we will be wearing face masks in this country very, very soon. Certainly on public transport and certainly in our big cities. So we'll have to maintain social distancing. We'll be told to wear face masks. There will be a gradual easing of the lockdown. But I do feel very sorry for some people. Yesterday morning on LBC, I had a phone call from a 90-year-old called Alan, who said to me that his wife had died, both his children had died, he's 90, he's on his own, and he said in an absolutely heartbreaking voice, you know, I'm being told I might have to isolate for up to another year. I don't think I can bear it. And it was a very difficult phone call to take. Now, it does seem to me that 700,000 people volunteered to help in any way they could. And surely people like Alan need to be linked up, getting a phone call every day, maybe even the odd little chat 6 feet away on a doorstep. So I'm afraid lockdown is going to persist for quite a long time. And that's got pretty serious consequences for the mental health of the nation. I've no doubt the divorce rate's going to go through the roof as well. So it's not an easy time for any of us. We just, again, need to be treated like grown-ups and at least given some way forward. You know, Mrs. Merkel speaks to the German nation in a completely unvarnished way, not holding back the truth. And she's been offering the Germans, you know, some real genuine light at the end of the tunnel. We're not getting any of that. In fact, we're not getting very much at all in some ways, because there was a little hint from government advisor Jenny Harries over the weekend that maybe obesity was a big factor amongst those who'd suffered badly and indeed died. And certainly all the doctors that I've spoken to have said, you know, we're going to be quite surprised at the end of this, how many people have died who are seriously overweight. It's not a conversation we're having. I suppose it's too difficult for a politically correct government to talk about obesity for fear of causing offence to a large percentage of the population, but we need to do it. And when you think about it, when the government are spending vast sums of money on adverts, you know, I hear them on the radio, step outside your front door and you might die. I mean, they've terrified us into observing lockdown in quite a big way. What about some more positive stuff? Well, I don't want a nanny state. Of course I don't. But what about some adverts giving us some advice during lockdown about health and exercise, fronted up, not by some bureaucrat, but fronted up maybe by a celebrity or whatever. I think there could be some positive things that government actually tries to do. Mercifully, I will say about lockdown that the police now appear to be taking a much more grown-up and sensible approach. All those ridiculous stories about non-essential shopping items in Bar Hill in Cambridgeshire, or black dye being put into lakes in Derbyshire, or drones being sent up to identify dog walkers. There is now much more of a degree of common sense coming into this, and we can use our cars and drive a few miles to go and exercise. So that, at least, I am pleased about. So let's finish with the good, which, of course, is Captain Tom. I mean, it's just amazing. Over 25 million quid he's raised. A couple of young people said to me, wow, isn't he amazing? And somehow the sight of this man who's 100 very shortly, with his military regimental tie, his blazer with his badge on it, walking around the garden, but also acting as a bit of a philosopher, I think, for this crisis, and telling us, however bad it gets, you know, the sunshine is just around the corner, has proved to be truly inspirational. The record that he's done with Michael Ball has gone to #1. And I'm pleased to say that my friends from the Biggin Hill Heritage Hangar, where they do unbelievable work, getting old Spitfires, Hurricanes, even a Messerschmitt or two, rebuilding them, getting them back in the air. It's an incredible operation. And they are going to fly a Spitfire from Biggin Hill. They've put the NHS logo on the side of the Spirit of Kent Spitfire, a 1945 Spitfire. And they're going to fly that over Tom's house on the 30th of April to celebrate his 100th birthday. That's a great initiative from the guys at Biggin Hill. And they're hoping to get permission to fly over and do a bit of a wingtip as many hospitals on the way there and back as they possibly can. So that's good. The bad is that we're being very badly governed. We have some incredibly low-grade cabinet ministers, and Boris needs to get a grip, and quickly, to maintain public confidence. And the ugly, oh dear, I can hardly bear it. Pubs shut till Christmas. I can't bear it.